Okay, hello everyone. This is a new show called Crossing the Pacific, where we are going to talk about the LPL, and in particular bringing it to the Western or the English-speaking audience. If you don't know, this is Nelson on my. I can't do this. This is Nelson to the other side of the screen, right? I'm really bad at cross-directional introductions. But he is a coach, a former coach of LNG, also of Snake before they rebranded as LNG, the famous team that took down Invictus Gaming in the LPL playoffs in 2019, not
19,
2020.
yeah.
Yep, in 2019. So they 3-0'd them with Tristana. So that's, as you may know, LNG still plays Tristana, still gets Tristana bans, but for very different reasons.
Yeah, before that it was like Fan, the best the
Yeah,
best casted in
fun,
LPL.
fun. Yep, fun, fun. The often sidelined best Kassadin and Tristana BTFOer of the LPL.
Yeah.
But yes, and I am Kelsey. I previously worked for 100 Thieves and H2K, and I am now on part of Evil Geniuses as part of the basically their effort and initiative to improve the ecosystem in North America for development. Mostly the idea of the show is that we're going to talk about a lot of different topics, not just LPL specific, in relation to okay, this is how some LPL coaches and some LPL teams see this idea, but we don't really see it that way at all in NA or maybe EU. But for now, we're just going to give an introduction in terms of my perspective on the LPL preseason rankings, Nelson's perspective, and then close out talking about the top five teams in the LPL right now. So,
Yeah.
yep, I'm just gonna publish them both on screen for all of our shame.
Looks like you're like a JD fan and a Victory 5 fan.
Oh yeah, I'm a huge JD fan. Okay, so basically what we would say here is that I had V5, which actually I had V5 really
High up.
yeah, I guess relatively high up. I had RNG relatively high up too, relative to what you have. And then for me it was Rogue Warriors I hate, obviously. If we're just doing rankings by how much you hate or like a team, quote unquote.
I mean,
Um,
I can't believe like you didn't trust in Haro.
yeah,
So I felt like Haro is good enough to like, not be last.
you think Haro is good enough to not be last? I think that
Yeah.
Haro is like also kind of his own worst enemy at times, but he's actually performed really, really well. I agree. This recent split. Generally speaking, though, when I was looking at Rogue Warriors, it was like I look at this team and they have potentially the worst mid in the LPL, so that's already a big problem. They have I'm thinking that their bot lane and their top cannot carry at all. So it's basically just Haro 1v9 only. Whereas the other teams have individual players from the LDL that I recognize as okay, maybe these guys can get better, you know? So for me, these
Yeah.
rankings were very much based on how I think, like, how much I think these teams will look like at the end of spring or anything
I
along
think
those lines. So
at least for Rogue Warriors, I think that they they don't really have like the worst like mid and jungle. At least in the LPL,
they
But
don't have the
what
worst jungle. They have the worst mid, I
yeah,
think, close to the
I,
worst.
I mean, I don't really agree, but what surprised me was like their top lane was playing a lot better than what I expected,
Mhm.
because like Ziv wasn't even doing much in the
Mhm.
PCS, but he performed like pretty well in LPL.
He's performed really well. I don't know if you watched the series today fully, but there
Yeah, I
was
did.
just a lot of I don't even think it's his laning, right? Because I can't see a
Yeah,
preview, so I can't fully assess it. It's just he is dropping waves, so many waves, and falling so behind on plays that just shouldn't happen or shouldn't work. And that's the biggest problem that prevents him from being an actual threat on this team. That is not something I can say that I anticipated because yeah, in terms of like mechanics and the way he's playing lane and stuff like that, I think he has performed better than I expected. So
yeah,
yeah,
he managed to like go even, and that was like quite surprising for me.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And oh yeah, for your list, is it like for spring or for the whole year?
My list is based on like by the end of spring. So
Oh yeah, same
yeah.
same for mine.
Mm-hmm. So this is kind of the preseason power rankings. Obviously, neither of us published these, but this was generally speaking like what I anticipated the teams to look like, how I expected the rankings to shake out. Obviously, I think if I were smarter and really wanted to edit my list, I'd make myself look better and not have JDG in
you,
second
you
at
just go
minimum.
you just go
You
to
know.
Gamepedia right now. It's like EDG first, W second, and RNG third.
Yeah, it's okay. Seems good. Yep. So that's generally like what we have here. And then I think the biggest teams that we can talk about on this list, because obviously people probably don't care that much about Rogue Warriors, but the biggest teams that are maybe a surprise are Royal Never Give Up, Edward Gaming for me, and then let's see, and then JDG as well is probably one. Because
Oh yeah,
you even have JDG like relatively high. You have them at sixth, right? So, and I
yeah.
think they've been performing pretty poorly with by that metric. So,
I think for me, like the most exciting teams is like EDG, RNG, and like what's it called, like Rare Atom,
for
which was
Adam.
previously called VG Gaming. Yeah, I think they're like the three most interesting
Mm-hmm.
teams because I like their rosters, like the way they did their rosters.
I
Even though like
mm-hmm. Go ahead.
RNGN has some issues, but I think they're like kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think for me right now, Royal Never Give Up is the most fun team to watch. For sure. The reason why I had them higher was mostly because it's like, okay, even though this team doesn't look that good on paper, you still have Ming, you still have like Xiaohu Cryan on the roster. And then Wei and Cryan work pretty decently together. They were probably the only good parts of that Star team other than Xiaozi. So I don't know. For me, it was like, okay, this team is probably still making playoffs just because they can be unexpected depending on how Xiaohu looks top lane. And since in Demacia Cup he wasn't awful, he actually did pretty well in terms of how he was playing Akali and then these other picks. So I do think that there are definitely more pain points for Xiaohu top than saying that he's a really good top laner now. I wouldn't say that, but I think in terms of just their overall performance and expectation, he's done pretty well.
Cause I think at least for RNG, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
at
Yep.
least for RNG, because I mean I'm pretty close with Tabi. I've talked to him,
Mhm.
over the off season, and like we kind of knew like Shahu was going top, and I think especially like what they showed during this few
Mhm.
weeks, I felt like this is something that I think no other team in the world can do, because so basically it's like Perks moving to top lane, instead
Yep.
to bot lane,
Mhm.
and I think like RNG is still gonna play the same way. They're gonna play only for laners, and
Mhm.
I think Wei is like the perfect jungler for that because everyone knows him. Is He's like the Jarvan level 2. I'm just gonna sit bot forever. But now like RNG can sit in top lane instead.
Yep. I think yeah, it's for me it's really interesting because I think the biggest problems that I'm seeing for this team is that when Xiaohu doesn't really understand like how to thin wave in terms of wave management on top lane so far. So when his jungler is on the opposite side of the map, he's probably just going to get dove and dive in most matchups where he's losing. And then so that's like one of the big things that I've noticed so far is that he's just not kind of managing the wave properly or even contesting the wave when it's bouncing back to him as much. And then the other thing that I've noticed about RNG is if they're forced into a scenario where they have to just hard 5v5 without first getting like good vision advantage and things along those lines, then they probably just die, or they don't do well. Whereas, and they aren't very good at assessing what fights they can or can't take in those timings. But in terms of playing out pick comps, like setting up the map to play pick comps using side lane pressure very well, it reminds me of like 2017 RNG was one of the first LPL teams to do that well. So that's why I kind of am excited to watch them right now. Just I think that they're thinking about the map a lot more intelligently than, for example, TES is not thinking about the map at all. So
Yeah, because I believe like Xiaohu, he's like one of the best or
mm-hmm,
one of the better like players in playing the side lane,
mm-hmm,
especially
yep,
since he moved top. So since you move top, it's usually easier to side lane because you're not on like Oriana, stuff like
yep.
that. So you don't really need your team to side lane most of the times.
Unless you're playing
And
split push Oriana, and then you're side
yeah, then
laning.
and even if he did that, I
Mm-hmm,
think it was fine because even
yep.
though he died, I remember there was a game where the Oriana game where he got collapsed on, but
Hmm.
I think if he had more experience, he would just take the tower and die instead of trying to run away and die
Yeah.
and die instead.
Hmm.
But even if he died, it didn't affect the game. He didn't lose anything because he got a wave up. So
Yep.
so I think it would be like pretty good for RNG. Like once Xiao gets more used to the lane, learns like more
Hmm.
traditional champions.
Yep. It's funny 'cause it's like, oh, okay, we're gonna ban all these top jumps that I maybe barely play. I guess I'll just play Oriana. And it's also a nice change as well because they were very good at this kind of 1-3-1 or 1-4 style when when he was playing a lot of Rise and champions like this, but then they shifted a lot more towards the end of when UCI was playing. They shifted a lot more towards like Rumble, which obviously is never going to side lane well versus most champs. So it's refreshing to see the style like come back a little bit for them. So that's I'm glad that they kind of took the hard pivot because obviously Gala is a player who also is used to being played around very aggressively and stuff like that. But I don't think that that's the way that you should play with Gala because he's limited in the amount of champions that he can actually carry the game with from that perspective. So I like this different approach.
Yeah,
Yep.
of course. I think RNG. I think especially like since Cryin is the mid lane now, and I think
Mhm.
compared to Xiaohu he was more. At least when you compare like Spring Split when Cryin
Mhm.
was an E-star, I think he was more of a consistent carry compared to Xiaohu, who had like some really bad games and some games where you thought it was Rookie instead. So
Yeah,
I
for
I, I
sure.
think it's a good change for them.
Yep. I think for me, like Cryan is the kind of player who will have some carry performances, but his highs don't seem as high.
Yeah,
The problem with
but I
Xiaohu,
think it's like
yeah,
maybe like a 7 out of 10.
yeah, yeah. The problem with Xiaohu is that he can have like really high highs, but they almost have never occurred on the international stage. So a,
I mean,
a lot
it
of
occurred at the end of the summer
mhm,
split last year.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So like that will cause a lot of the problems and with a lot of people who remember or think of Xiaohu as like a really strong carry player is if you haven't watched a lot of LPL, obviously that will be the image in your mind will be the Kale in 2019 Worlds, but um but I think that domestically he's put on like really strong performances and top lane is a role where in LPL we've seen a lot more, feast or famine type carry play. So maybe it'll work really well for him. Um,
Yep.
in terms of other surprising teams, so we have the Edward Gaming, right? You had Edward Gaming
Yep.
really high up. You had Edward Gaming first place. I
Top. Yeah.
yeah. When I see Edward Gaming, I still don't feel like they are the best team in the LPL. So I'm curious about your take on that.
Because at least like in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
I think like the strongest teams who are, like for Spring Split would be the ones who they know, because right now I think the meta is the same. It's still the same as last year. As in, you still have to fight for dragons or trade properly. And I think at least if you talk about the first part, how you set up for dragon, I think like EDG are one of the few teams who know how to do that. Like how I set my side waves and what to do after I set my side waves. Like the time windows before dragon starts.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the issues they had last year was the shot caller was Mako and it was affecting his play, and their shot calling wasn't that good as well. Like they threw so many games last year,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
the 20-minute
I'm pretty sure
EDG.
this year. I'm pretty sure this year is the shot caller right now is Flandre because he has always been a shot caller, and and I'm and they changed their coaching staff as well. And from what I know, it's like the head coach or is like Kenju, who was also the coach of Snake,
Mm-hmm.
and LNG before. So I felt like it was a good change for them because at least from all the different coaches I worked with, and I worked with like quite a few good coaches, I think like he stands out the most as like the most knowledgeable coach and the one who like knows how to teach his players. It's just that back then when he was on Snake, he didn't have the players to do it.
Okay. So that's a good sign. I'm glad that we're getting those types of coaches moved up to teams like EDG then. I think
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and I think like Flounder is like, or like overall, I
Mm-hmm.
think he's just like the best top laner,
You think
probably
so?
like in the world. Yeah,
Okay. I don't know if he's
as
the
in
best top laner in the
he
world.
can
I
choose to
know.
be the best top laner in the world
Okay, okay,
if he
okay.
wants.
We'll put it that
And
way. Yeah,
and I think right now he chooses to be the best top laner. So
yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Well, I'm actually very impressed by how Nuguri has adapted to LPL so far. So, we have maybe a couple of top laners choosing to be the best top laner in the world from LPL then. Um,
I mean, I saw I think his games today,
mhm.
and he was trying to learn from TheShy. So he was like 0-3,
Yeah,
not
that's
up CS.
but that was more what I expected from him though, right? In terms of like how he
Yeah.
would play consistently, because I historically I found that a lot of LCK tops don't adapt well to LPL because if they don't start in the LPL like the TheShy did, just because they are used to a very certain style of play. Like for example, I would say that the way you think of like a lot of good LCK top laners as being the best top laners in the world because their teams are very habitually setting up vision around their side, setting up very good control basically on support recall to walk into topside jungle and allow them to play basically as they would as if the jungler isn't there, you know? And there are a lot of top laners like that you think of historically as very strong, like Khan, Marin, all of these top laners that play very similarly to that. I think Smep to an extent as well, who play very similarly to that approach. But if they come to the LPL, they don't necessarily get that same consistent setup and that same consistent approach to playing, especially to topside. So they tend to struggle more and look a lot more inconsistent. But so far, I'm seeing like less of that from Nuguri in general. So I've
Oh,
been fairly impressed with him. I think the Flandre for me is a really interesting player because the reason why I had EDG low is because I thought that they would start Clear Love and try to start Clear Love and Flandre in the same game, and I thought that there's no way this ever works, right? But the
yeah, it might,
so
but I'm not sure as well.
yeah, but I think so. My opinion is that they would do like Xiaoshang with Clear Love and then Flandre with JJ, and that would work out better. But obviously, Flandre with JJ is the better combination of the two, most likely. I haven't seen Clear Love play in the pro game for a long time, so I can't say specifically, but that's what I feel like would be the case, or based on how Xiaoshang plays, how Flandre plays, and how JJ play, and how Clear Love played historically. So.
I think, and I believe like EDG has the same idea. It's
Mhm.
like it's probably like Shashank. He's not ready to at least play in this team, because it will be too limited in the draft at least, because he doesn't play laning well enough, or the way he plays laning is too. He sacrifices like too much for his team, and at least the best coaches or the best players, they don't think that's the correct way to play.
Yeah, it's not because it's basically if you're looking at the wave, you should be able to at least identify when a trade is free or when you can like push the wave so that if you push like on survive side and you get the wave to crash, then you're way safer than if you let the wave come to you and don't contest it, which is like a big thing that I was talking about before with Shahu, right?
Yeah,
And I think Xiaoshang is like a little bit more like that in terms of his concept of how to play quote unquote safe side.
yeah,
Um,
and I think he's like, he's probably just like the third summer spell for bot lane,
yeah.
because he'll sack every single wave if his bot lane calls for him,
Mhm.
and he'll be like 70 CS down. And if you lose to EDG, like during that period, then your top laner would tell you like, how do you lose to this top laner when I'm up like 100 CS?
Yeah. Your top laner would say, just don't fight, you know? I am up 100 CS
Yeah,
on this guy.
I'm
Why are you
100 CS.
fighting bottom? How does he get a
I'm,
kill there? Exactly. um,
or I think like the worst case is he TP's down, he doesn't get a kill, but he still wins the game.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's the worst part. I think but for me, like if you think about Clear Love, I would say that almost every attempt that he's made to play around the top side of the map has been really poor, and that makes me feel like he just understands bot lane matchups more, and like when he can contest and when he can play. Um,
Actually, I think that's not, at least for now, that's not really
mhm.
realistic to say, because I at least I've worked with Flandre and like some kind of slightly better bot laners like Light.
Mhm.
So like they would tell the jungler like before the game starts, like you come at like 3 minutes, 3:15, stuff like that, or third wave, fourth wave,
Yep. Mhm.
because my wave is gonna be in a bad spot at that time. If the enemy is good, my wave is gonna be in a bad spot.
Yep.
If the enemy is bad, then it's a good thing. So I don't think like the jungler has to think about the lane matchups anymore. At least for in China, because most players should be able to tell you, or the good
Yeah,
players
I
should be
mean
able
they
to tell
they
you
should be able to
how
tell
the
you,
matchups
right?
go.
But
Yeah.
I also watch LPL, and I also notice that they're playing the matchups like very wrong sometimes, or they don't seem to
Oh,
understand,
oh, yeah.
or they'll just fight anyway, bottom. And
Yeah.
then so for me, it's like not just that though. It's like Clearlove can look at is more likely to look at. So I understand your perception. It's like that doesn't make sense, but I can't think of a better reason as to why Clearlove like sucked at playing around top his entire career. Other than maybe every top laner he
He's
played
top
with
laner.
just doesn't talk, or like his coach or his bot lane was like, no, this is not how we play. We're playing really hard around
I mean,
bot.
I think
Yeah.
back then the game wasn't as like evolved right now.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
the level
But
of coaching and the
even
understanding of laning.
yeah, but even like this was 2 years ago or whatever before he retired, right? It was like the last time he played a pro game.
2 years.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because he was only a coach for 2020, right? And then 2019 he
He
played a
was
little
on the
bit.
bench.
Yeah, he was on the bench for a lot, but he
Okay,
played a
was on the
little bit.
bench.
Hmm. But for me, it's just like okay, I think. And then there were times where he would maybe play to top side, and it wasn't that like all of his top laners were bad. It was just very much like, for example, when you had Cora One playing carries on some sides, it was it was just not a good 2v2. Whereas like he knows level 6, you always play. We have these level 6 ultimates. We are executing this. They would be able to set up these ridiculous concepts like Twitch counters Lucian, and then people would just buy into it because they would know that okay, Clearlove is a better jungler. He will come bot. We will 3v3, and even though our AD is weaker, AD champion is weaker, we still win the 3v3. These like really ridiculous ideas that came out of EDG. Whereas I don't think there was anything like that with top lane. So maybe he'd be better at it now. Who knows? I also think that the way that Clearlove plays might be a little bit better for the meta than the way JJ plays, but we'll see how it plays out. But I think for me, like I'm just immediately thinking about these rosters, and I don't think you could have Flandre plus Clearlove start too easily, and I don't think that you could have a JJ plus Xiaoshang. I think that would just be a disaster in terms of like team direction.
Yeah, I mean it would be just like
Yeah.
2019, 2020,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not what we want to see. But
Yep.
I think like Flandre was basic. I think it was like the signing of the season because they needed a better top laner, needed a better shot caller, and they got one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
I also think it's that like the topic of like should junglers know lane matchups. I definitely agree that it's more the laner's responsibility to tell. But I also think that if the lane matchup is, for example, really volatile, or a matchup you can make the matchup volatile by taking bad trades, and the jungler will be on your side and the other jungler won't. Like that's also a scenario that a jungler can control. They can tell their bot lane like we should fight now, or you should fight now, and I'll be there on the way, in like 2 camps, and we can set up a play like this.
So
Uh,
I think at least for bot lane, I
mhm.
think it's just. Oh, I mean for side lanes at least, like the how's it called?
Mhm.
Basically, like the laners will tell you like, oh, I can farm or I can stack a wave,
Yep.
or I'm gonna get
Yep.
or the enemy is gonna stack a wave. So basically, there's only like these three scenarios,
Mhm.
or the fourth one. Like whoever comes first is gonna win.
Yeah,
Like
I
whichever
think,
jungle comes first, I mean.
and those
But I think
are.
that's not as often. Yeah.
Mhm. I think those aren't the only scenarios though, right? Because theoretically you say, okay, if this matchup goes perfectly, right, then they will stack a wave on us and we can't really do anything. We can't contest the wave, so we're diveable. We'll probably need help on this timing. Or you can say
Yep.
like, I can build a big wave. Can you do like these 3 camps and then come and then we can like set up a play like that. But so those are definitely very possible scenarios. The other one is like the lane is going to be volatile, or I can make the lane volatile. And sometimes even if say that and there's like a matchup where you will get a lot of poke fighting them if you contest the wave, but they won't for sure kill you. But you can bait your jungler down because you know the enemy jungler is going top, right? And then you can win a fight for that. So even if you lose more HP than the enemy bot lane, that's still a winning scenario for you because your jungler is there. So you can play it like
Yeah,
that and disrupt the fights like that. So
I
yeah.
mean, I understand what you say. Like,
Hmm.
because I know, like, I think last split,
Hmm.
yeah, we were playing RNG. I think it was like Ezreal, like the Ezreal Yumi against Aphelios meta.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like both of them are like 200 years each, and like from what I know, from like what
Hmm.
Light said was like, oh, if I'm on Ezreal side, I'm probably gonna get dived. I'm probably
Yeah.
gonna get
That should
stacked on,
happen.
and yep. And I remember like in the middle of the game, it's like he just said in comms, oh, this guy's bad. He's not gonna dive me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
stuff like that, or like what you said before is like maybe the enemy jungler is like farming from bot lane to top lane, while your own jungler is like from top to bot. And I think stuff like this, at least for the very top players, it affects the way they lane
Hmm.
anyway. Like if they know
Yeah.
that jungler won't be here at the
Yeah.
second,
Yeah.
third, or third wave, yeah, they're not gonna play aggressive.
Yeah. For sure.
But
Like for example.
but
Mhm.
sometimes like accidents do happen. So
Yeah, yeah, sometimes accidents do happen. It's more like so obviously the Ezreal Yumi Aphelios matchup is a bad one because you should not contest Aphelios really as Ezreal Yumi. Depending on his supports, like maybe he just has a really useless support, but say like for example some matchups that are really common right now are like Galio, Leona. And typically speaking, like Galio will get pushed in that lane, like the CC can be, depending on your AD, can be like very guaranteed. But if you are still going, but if you know your jungler is coming bot, you can still go for an engage as Leona, like be half health, and then have your jungler come down and fight, and still win a trade off of that later. So just because like they'll throw the wave by fighting into you, and then you can basically catch the wave under your tower. So like there are a lot of nuances like that, but
yeah,
I think Klilov is probably historically more comfortable setting up those types of plays than with his top laner. And also, it's probably just because they never practiced that much together, you know? Like the top and jungle, like we're going to
oh
play
yeah,
for 2v2s and scrims. So that's also probably a factor. Really just depends.
that's I think in the past it would be quite rare because
Yep.
like EDG only played bot side, but I'm pretty sure like in the
Hmm.
current EDG, at least in scrims, you're gonna play 2v2 every day.
Hmm.
Probably
Yep.
like every scrim you're gonna be like 2v2 top lane,
2v2 top line, yeah, probably every day.
or
But
just go next.
yeah, I think it also depends on the coaching, right? Because if the coaching is not someone who can kind of change Clearlove's mind, then Clearlove will just probably default to bad habits, which is like what older players tend to do, you know. Um,
Mhm.
and he'll only want to play around bot because it's like more comfortable and easier to do. So let's see. In terms of the next team, since we should probably move on. I think for me, one of the other interesting ones on this list, because we talked about RNG EDG, is probably TES in terms of their current performance. And then because you had them second and I had them first. And then probably JDG, which even though like you had way less faith in them than I did, they're definitely not doing well, no matter how
Yeah,
you slice it. So, yeah, we'll start with we'll start by
yeah,
talking.
TS.
We can talk about
Uh,
TES.
I mean, what do you think of their new support?
I think their new support is kind of what I would expect from a rookie support. He's has good trigger pull, like he wants to go in and identify situations, but he's very tunnel visioning on those factors. I haven't watched their bot lane as much. Like I haven't been able to watch the preview for their bot lane, so I can't speak to because I know one of the biggest issues that I had with Jackie Love and Yuyanja is I thought their laning was terrible. So I can't tell if he's an upgrade on the 2v2 laning yet. But the but I think they're as a support, I like kind of his killer instinct. But almost everything else, he's not an upgrade on. Their vision control right now is maybe one of the worst in the league. The way that they're thinking about, they're trying to play like these very straightforward all-in comps. I think probably to complement him. But if the enemy team drafts around that, they don't adapt well. You know. So yeah, it's a rough one right now, and I don't want to blame it all on support because I also think that TES have a tendency to go for these like high risk plays that will set their jungler behind. So if the enemy team is just playing well and intelligently, they'll have a larger team fighting threat from their jungle in the game. So
I mean, I think at least for this split so far, they didn't like bully. They didn't let Karsa fall so far behind
so far, yeah. I
as as,
mean,
as much. But I think like the support. I mean, I wouldn't say it's like killer instinct, because he gets his own team killed. Because I watched their games, and I can say like almost every game was lost because of him, because he didn't know how to flank or when to engage. And I think like TS basically they just can't say no. If their support engages, they'll just go in, whether it's good or
mhm.
bad. They wouldn't be like, oh, let's just run, let him die. But they'll just follow up on the engage, and I think every time it turns out really bad as well.
Yeah, I think that that's true as well. But I wouldn't say that every game is lost because, like, for example, some of their drafts have been horrendous as usual. So
So
I wouldn't say
yeah,
it's all just him. I also have a
I'll
tendency,
say like
yeah,
it's the key moments
yeah. The
where
moments
you need
like,
someone to be clutch. He
mhm,
just screws up.
mhm. But I think that, like, obviously we've had very good rookie sport debuts in LPL historically, but I feel like it's still really hard to do that. Um, to like come in as a strong rookie support, have the responsibility for I'm going to call all the fights for my team, and then not screw up a little bit in your first split. So I tend to not be like too hard on that. I think that maybe if they just straight up lose the game off of that, then he'll learn faster than if okay we just let him die and doesn't matter, we still win the game. As weird as that sounds.
So
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Yeah. So
I mean that's why I put them second as well, because
yeah.
I'm pretty sure if they lose, he's gonna learn like really fast. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that TS is a team where it's like a lot of their games are just like I always feel so bad about how they play and still win, but it's often
I mean,
just player difference, you know. Like they have
they're
really
basically like
really
IG. So
yeah, yeah, they have really strong players and they end up performing well with that position. I think that it's actually good for the LPL if they start getting punished and lose more games. But I also think that right now they're probably not too concerned with the scoreline, especially since they probably are taking it a bit easy since they're one of the only teams that had like their full roster in the Demacia Cup. They had made it pretty far in Worlds, so their teams like that have a tendency to take it a little bit easy the first few weeks of LPL spring. So I guess we'll get a better read. I think the most recent games they didn't look strong, but they looked more like TES. They didn't look they still had the same mistakes that they had before, but they still were able to fight their way out of bad situations.
I mean, I just felt that they basically, I think like 369 wasn't or isn't playing as well
Mm-hmm.
as he could or as he was at Wolves, and I think the support as well probably making like too many mistakes, and he should be able to get it fixed like by playoffs, and
Mm-hmm.
they should be in playoffs because there are 10 teams this year, so quite hard to miss playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. I think that they'll definitely make playoffs. I'm curious if they won't make finals, for example. I think that if they don't make finals, it's probably good for them and good for LPL,
Yeah,
just in terms of how they play. But this is for now. I still am not ready to knock them out of like top two, top three in my rankings, or even potentially top one, because I think that we'll still see them kind of surge up towards the end in terms of oh, they're getting away with the same stupid shit that they always got away with. Let's let's go on.
yeah. I think at least like I don't like this word, but I think like the potential is there.
Sure,
You
sure.
know,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So basically, it's like 369 Knights, Jack Love. I think any of them can just win a game by themselves, and they are one of the few teams who have those players in all three roles, or maybe like even jungle
And
as well.
even jungle, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think, and the only reason why I put EDG above them, because I just felt that EDG could match them, especially in like top and AD.
So I think some of the question marks for me in terms of BDG were there were fights that they were taking in their last series that were you very obviously just don't take. But that's very common in LPL, I guess. I think like I would be curious to hear your take on it. Like for example, in the EDG series, versus TT. It was the second game where, you know, they didn't have any completed items. Like TT were all in position before them, so they wouldn't be able to use range advantage on the dragon when they were fighting. But EDG still go in and try to fight it anyway. Versus their like all in comp, and then Rek'Sai gets a bunch of kills. Yes, Rek'Sai was played. But that was like kind of for me the biggest like kind of question mark that I'd seen in their previous series. Maybe they just didn't care because it's TT and no one loses TT, but
I think, all right, to probably like was I think it was like what, second, third Drake.
yeah, I think it was 2nd. Mm-hmm.
I think it was the second Drake, and at least from what I know, like if you can get a better position, like even though if like how do I say, like the enemy they set up first, but if they make like a small positioning mistake and you manage to get a position in the river, I think almost every team is gonna take the fight, you know. Like,
Not
and
for
I'm pretty
second, not for second Drake. I don't agree. I think so. For example, like the fight, the probability of that fight being won based on their champions and EDG's champions was so low that I think that you can actually guaranteed get like top camps in that position, get top T1, like any of those factors or top T2. I forget what exactly was up on the map. I'd have to look at the bot again, but for me, it's like in any of those circumstances, it's just like it's a second dragon. Who cares? Like, yeah. So for me, it's just it was a really weird thing that they were tunnel visioning on that. So that's like something that comes up a lot in LPL matches. So I was curious to hear your perspective on it too.
oh, because at least from what I know, like with my experience working with Flandre, like usually at the start of the season or in the past, he used to have this like obsession on dragon. So basically, you have to fight for every dragon,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no such thing as trading, and we kind of fixed that at the end of the split.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But basically, like every split, the same issue happens. So you have to fix it again. And I think, I mean, after he makes this like mistake, I think he'll probably like they'll probably fix it for the rest of the split.
Okay.
And they'll look to trade or look to get top tower. But I mean I can understand because like I saw the setup. It was like third Drake. I saw setup for third Drake, and they actually had everything set up for the dragon. It's just that they kind of rotated pretty late,
Mm-hmm.
even though they had set up like already this like they set up top side first, and then they want to rotate to bot side. But someone took an extra wave, so they were late.
Someone.
Somebody took an extra wave, so they were late, and
Yeah.
and the fight ended up like kind of bad, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
I think like even in LPL, if you're like 1.5 items and enemy has like 2 items, most teams will just take the fight if they think they have
It
the proper
depends.
setup.
I mean, it depends on the items though, and I'm actually really curious to talk about stuff like this with you. Like maybe we'll do one episode where we just do a bot review and talk about objective setups because I think we'll have a lot of disparate discrepancies in terms of what we think is like a good way to set up for Dragon or Baron,
Mhm.
and what you, team coaches or players in LPL would think. So I think that would be pretty interesting to see.
Yeah,
Um,
because I think like there are a lot of differences, especially like during Worlds. Is like it was kind of obvious that there was a huge difference
yep.
because
Mhm.
I was watching like at least on Twitter, everyone's like, or at least on Twitter and broadcast, everyone was like, "Oh, G2 lost draft. Like G2 can't win with this draft," and I'm like, "There's no way G2 can lose with the
With
draft
this
they
draft,
got." You
sure.
know?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone thought G2 was like, "Oh no, bad draft, bench grabs, stuff like that." But there's no way. In my
And
mind, it was like, "There's no way G2 lose." And I think the funny thing was, like, Grabs was talking to me like after the game, and I told him I thought like, "No way you lose."
mhm. And in
So,
fairness,
I
yeah,
feel like everyone has a different, at least like the
yeah.
West and
Mhm.
the East, they have a different idea on how to draft.
Yeah, I think even in the West though, there are differences in perspective too. Like there are definitely times where I guess like you probably didn't watch the Golden Guardians TSM game because well,
Which last year?
this in the lock-in tournament, Golden
Oh,
Guardians
no.
TS
You mean? Oh, I actually watched all of TSM games because
you
I'm
watch
like
all of
pretty
them?
close with.
Oh, because
Yeah,
of
I'm pretty
Sword
close
Art?
to
Okay, it says Sword
yeah, I'm
Art.
pretty close
Right.
to Sword Art, so I watched all his
Yeah.
games there.
But I was looking at that draft, for example, and I was like, and everyone on Twitter was talking about how like TSM had the worst draft in the history of mankind, and I was like, but really, unless Golden Guardians execute on this specific thing, like there's no way TSM lose, right? There is just no way. Um, so I don't know. Like there's definitely a lot of differences, but I would be curious to hear like generally
Uh,
what your perception of stuff
oh,
is.
let me see. Is that the Galio
Yeah,
Camille
it's the
against
Galio
our
Camille.
our
Mm-hmm.
early?
Yep.
I mean, it's not that bad. I don't think this draft is that bad for TSM, but like
Mm-hmm.
if it was like a Chinese team, I would take TSM's draft like every day.
If it were a Chinese team, you would say TSM's draft wins, or
Yeah,
what do you
because
mean? Mm-hmm.
okay, or I could just like if my mid laner was like rookie or someone who can play Oriana,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
sure, sure.
who can lane with Oriana,
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna win for sure. But I mean, there was some issues with PoE's laning. Didn't handle the first few waves properly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's just it's not even that, right? It's that a lot of people were looking at this and saying that this was like three losing lanes. It's like it's definitely not three losing lanes. But
Because I'm not sure if like what people think about like winning lanes or losing
mhm,
lanes, because there are some lanes which win from level 1 to 3 and they lose all the way
yeah, yeah.
after that, and there are some lanes which gets
Hmm.
like Brom lanes, like if you have Brom even against Rakan, I can tell like maybe if Brom is like level 8, he's gonna win lane for sure because Rakan can't do anything, stuff like that.
Hmm. And then also, for example, yeah, like even Callista Thresh, it's difficult for them to play into Alistar at a certain point, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
and basically Jin is the champion which you can't smash Jin.
yeah, and you just WQ the wave, and the wave is gone as Jin
Exactly, yeah,
after,
exactly.
yeah. Hmm.
And basically like Kalista is like so hard to play against Oriana.
Yep. So yeah, like all these all in champs all get very screwed by Oriana, right? So like stuff like this, I think is would be interesting to talk more about, um, in terms of differences in perceptions of the game.
Maybe for
But
another show.
yep, yeah, yeah. For another episode, we'll do like a specific episode on that. Let's see. In terms of, and then I think the last one is JDG. So like the last really big discrepancy theme is JDG. So what do you think of JDG in terms of like how they performed based on your expectations?
I mean, it was kind of how I expected it, but I mean, I at first I didn't. I mean, I expected IG to beat them because at least when I was there in
Mm-hmm.
China, their jungle was playing like super well in scrims, and he basically, if he had his champions, and he would just like take over the game, and afterwards you found out like you just ban Lily and he's just a normal player, but yeah, and JDG gave like literally gave
Yeah.
Lily to IG and just got destroyed. And for JDG itself, like why I put them so low, I think basically they don't fulfill the conditions which I think a strong team should have.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is like you need to have like strong carries, and it's not like one or two, because at least how the meta works or how it works in China is like most of the good teams they have at least three strong carries. So it's like mid bot are obviously their carries and either jungle or top lane.
Mm-hmm.
You play with three carries. Unless you have UZI, that's like the only way you can win. And
Okay.
I don't feel like JDG has that, because I'm not a fan of like either of the mid laners. I think like Yagao has champion pool issues and some laning issues, and Xie he has some laning issues as well.
Unless you're Bjergsen.
Oh my goodness!
Is
I
that
mean,
too soon? I don't know. But I think so for me, yeah, I think Sia does have some laning issues, but like for example, a lot of the stuff that they were setting up in LGD was very specifically around like forcing 2v2 mid. And I know Kanavi doesn't play that way. But I thought that this was something that so that was something that they could either figure out or learn. But I think JDG as an organization or a staff just has a tendency to, oh, stuff isn't working. Let's take it out and let's like do something else.
Actually, I'm not so sure because they changed their head coach.
Yeah. So it could be different now, but in the past, like it's been that way in terms of Loken when they were playing with uh, Zoom on the bench as well for a while. So I think it's like they're trying to come up with new ways to play the game, but I'm not seeing anything that's panning out so far. I also think one way that they're getting punished more is like everyone had a very high opinion of Kanavi when he would just basically full clear his own camps because that would give him a lead based on how a lot of junglers were playing in LPL at the time. But you actually have to play for jungle creep advantage now. Like for example, in the IG series today, I was very impressed by like the thought process around Shun when they basically said, oh, okay, well this guy is doing dragon off tempo, I'm just going to take all of his top camps, and then they did the same thing when he went for Riptailed, and it's like, okay, well, I guess you just don't have it in
Yeah,
will now.
I mean, like regarding this point, because
Mm-hmm.
I think JDG they showed this, I would say, strategy, or I mean, you just call it strategy back
Mm-hmm.
when I think spring last year, and I think they were playing that way spring last year, but I think the first thing was nobody thought that it was a good way to play
Mm-hmm.
because everyone agreed that Kanavi is the best jungler in LPL, and they felt that only Kanavi could play that way. At least that's what the best junglers said, like only Kanavi could play this way, because SOFM he used to play this way, but slightly different. He didn't have help from his team,
Mm-hmm.
and JD they managed to so basically like they won spring, and like how LPL works is like everyone's just gonna copy the winner. So
Yeah.
so that year, like I mean that split it was like JDG and I would say like the teams maybe took like 1 or 2 months
Mm-hmm.
and 1 or 2 months to learn like how Kanavi played, and basically I think like at that period of time if you put any jungler like Graves against Trundle, they're going to be 100 CS up, and so basically I felt that they were found out or everyone
Mm-hmm.
knew how to play against them, and
So
it just happened that
yeah, I
they
guess
had
like,
yeah
oh, go ahead.
they played well in regular split to just qualify for Worlds.
I guess for me it was like it wasn't so much that they were even playing that style well though, right? It was because you would watch the way that Kanavi was pathing even towards the end of spring, and it's okay if he were really optimizing his pathing and trying to screw over the enemy jungler, he would invade bot here, but he's just going to go full clear and then recall and then look for a fight in river and basically only be slightly up because this other guy did a gank, right? And that was basically it. And then he was still playing like that in summer, but a lot of LPL teams, top LPL teams, even Suning, like you watch those series, SFM is still playing like Set, trying to force these types of fights with Lee Sin, and then not playing for jungle advantage, and you don't really see Suning start doing that until Worlds, and then they just do it better than JD. So for me, it was like, okay,
I think
I know.
before World it was because
Mm-hmm.
SFM he doesn't play in Italy
Yep.
until World, because
Mm-hmm.
of course was I knew him for quite a long time, and basically his idea was that everyone else plays literally better than me, so there was no point to learn it. But I mean, he learned for Worlds, and
Yep.
that was a good thing for him.
Cool. So, I mean, yeah, it's but like they were playing very aggressively for, okay, yeah, we're just going to take camps if the enemy jungler shows in a lane. And that worked very well for Suning. I actually saw them change and adapt kind of during the tournament, which is very rare for an LPL team. So, yeah, that was but for me, I was thinking, okay, we're going into this new season. JD is still going to be the team that like actually lets their jungler farm and isn't going to fight and skirmish in lanes all the time. But they're not doing that. But other teams are actually playing better around junglers. Like we see a lot of new junglers in LPL and a lot of teams playing better around that. So they're kind of taking the idea that JB had and just executing it way better. And
Yeah, I mean, I remember like last split it was so basically like Lumao would just roam together and take
mm-hmm,
fights together with Kanavi in the jungle. So, and from what I knew, basically like how the comms work would be like Lumao he would shot call everything. Kanavi wouldn't say much other than
mm-hmm,
ping, and basically the support would just follow where the jungler is. So, so there were like so many situations where there's a level 2 Braum in your red buff for no reason.
Yep.
and you lost your top side camps, stuff like that, you know.
Yep. So yeah, I think it's a JD is an interesting team. I don't know if I expect them to surge back up or not after this. I think probably the answer is not. Zoom reminds me a lot of like people will know Odoamna, right?
Hmm.
Where like he can be a good carry, but if his team is having a difficulty in another lane, he'll just say no, like I will blind here, I will pick this, and then he doesn't seem to have like those instincts of wanting to play really aggressive on his side of the map. Um, that will take over the situation. So uh that's so their team just lacks a lot of direction right now, and I agree with you. They don't really have someone who's going to take over the game and win it for them overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think he is still like one of the best top laners in
Mm-hmm.
the world, but he doesn't have like I feel like he doesn't have the killer instinct, same as like similar to like TheShy or Flandre, where if
Mm-hmm.
my team can't win, I can win it for them. I think
Yep.
he's just like stable. I don't make mistakes. I can play everything,
Mm-hmm.
but probably it's like I wouldn't require too much resources as well.
Yep. I mean that's like so. For example, if they're you know that if, for example, Odoana or Zoom is on a team with a bot lane that doesn't know how to lane well and requires jungle attention all the time to fix their wave, he's just going to be like, it's okay, I'll play Ornn, or it's okay, I'll play like Renekton, and I'll still play Renekton survive side and win. So it's really whatever. Okay. Whereas like TheShy would say, I don't care,
I don't.
or I don't care if
Yeah,
you die, if
I
you
can't.
die.
I
I
can't really
don't.
hear you.
Yeah, I don't care if you die 3 times. I'm still going to carry this game. Shut the fuck up. Let's go. Yeah.
Was close. Was close. I
It
saw his game against LG. I thought he was gonna carry with that vein. It was close.
was close. Yeah,
It was like, oh, it's
exactly.
0-2, but I'm up CS. I'm scaling.
Exactly.
I'm gonna win
Yeah.
it. I won one team fight. Oh, I just entered like the final team fight, and the game is over.
Yep. Actually, it was really close. I could see it. I was like, this draft is so terrible, but they're going to somehow pull out. Sounds fun.
And like this stuff is like, oh, you're not respecting the enemy team. Like
Yeah.
that's the first thing. Like even if you want to stall on them, you don't pick Vayne because Vayne, as fundamentally as a champion, is pretty bad because you can't shove any wave in. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter whether you're in top or bot lane. You can't shove the wave in, so you'll have issues trying to reset. But it doesn't matter for TheShy because you reset when you die.
I can't remember specifically what the draft was. It was like but I think it was.
It was Karma and Vayne
Oh
for
yeah,
TheShy.
Karma Vin. Yeah. Let me see if I can get the specific game. Just gonna pull it up because I remember there were a lot of problems with it without even going into what they.
I was thinking like, oh, are they like trolling or
Yeah,
they
yeah.
think like it's like super bad?
Wait. It's versus LNG. Oh yeah, yeah. So you're talking about the first week. Okay.
Yep. I think it was Karma against Aatrox and Vayne against Nar. I'm not sure. I think that's a matchup.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking also about just so this is IGLNG, right? Oh yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah. So my issues with it were actually it's not too like their first draft was terrible for sure.
Yep.
The
I mean,
Karma,
I can see how it
Jin,
works, but
Poke,
I,
Zoe, yeah, yeah. I mean they just didn't
I
have
wouldn't give Karma to TheShy.
basically they just don't have any answers to all in, right? And then you also have Karma for the Shy. Like they basically just can only kite back. So they have to have like perfect spacing for this draft to work. Or Galio has to 1v9. And then so like the other one
Like,
was is kind of like, oh, okay. I
it's
can
like Galio support, so
I actually can see how Vayne can 1v9 this game, like the Gnar, Olaf, Alistar, Trist, Zoe game, but like you basically just dodge the Zoe abilities and you can take over the entire fight. But
'cause at least for me, like how the game should work, I think, or at least how LNG tries to play, like part of it, because it seems like they forget the other half, but or how LNG wants to play, or how I think
Mhm.
it should it should play, because basically you only fight when there's something to fight for. So it's like or the enemy is inting.
Yep.
So basically, like you have to win side for IG's team comp to win, like the first game for the first game.
Mhm.
If IG wants to win with the Zoe team comp, they have to win side, and Karma is probably not gonna win the side.
Yeah, I definitely not. Definitely not gonna win the side.
And the second game, I mean, I can see how they win. Vayne's gonna win the side. They have first setup, but like setup doesn't exist in
And
IG
also,
dictionary. So
I mean, Vayne just loves playing into like these melee champs. Like,
yeah,
how do they ever kill her? So even if they have to fight, it's like there shouldn't be a fight that LNG can win at a certain point because they're fighting into like Graves, Vayne with low range champs. But
I mean, I'm pretty sure he just tried to 1v4 and he got hit by
yeah,
there's the kill. So
exactly. But yeah, I think that's mostly the teams that we were talking about that are kind of different to our expectations. What are your top 5 teams in LPL right now? Like, disregarding everything we talked about, disregarding standings, what do you think?
right now, let me see. I think right now, like the top 5, right? So I think it's based on form and how I think the teams play. I think it's like EDG, WE, RNG, what is it, Fun Plus. And for the last team, I'm not too sure because I think everyone's like the same. But I'll pick like LNG
You take
because they're the
LNG.
better score out of the rest of the other teams. I
Better
think it's the
score.
best score. Yeah,
For sure. I guess for
because
me, oh, go ahead.
yeah, because at least for EDG, RNG, WE, Fun Plus, I think like I like the way they play the map before Dragon. Or I wouldn't say I like the way. I partially agree with the way they play. Like they do some of the steps which I think are the correct steps, or they occasionally they do all the steps correctly. But the other teams they don't do like any of the steps, or basically they just group mid when there's nothing to fight for, and I think that's quite bad.
So
Like
you're
if you do it occasionally, I think it's well, like whatever. But if you do it like every time, then it doesn't really make sense.
so who's your number 1 team then?
Yeah, I think it's still EDG.
Still EDG? Okay. I have I have same top 4, which is EDG, WERNG, FPX. I'm going to throw TES in there because I think that we'll see them kind of resurge with their troll shit this coming week. And I don't think that they play correctly, but I think that they will start winning games.
Because I'm not sure how long it would take for their support to learn. Because I mean, because last year I had like I1D, and he didn't start regularly in spring, but he started regularly in summer, and basically you need like half a year to like get up to the standard of to be like an LPL support. And I think like this play he played really well. He made all the right plays most of the time.
Yeah, Iwandi's been playing really well actually. My live viewers have a very big Iwandi fan. So
You mean Janna fans? like I think like one fun fact was like because LG isn't one of the most like famous or popular teams, but I think Iwandi has other than Tarzan, and I think maybe like Icon right now. He has like the most fans in the team, because he plays Janna. So it's like
oh, okay, of course, yeah.
all the fangirls like waiting for him and giving him gifts because he played Janna
Good to know.
and Lux. He was the first one to play like Lux and Janna.
Good to know. He's representing the e-girls on the Rift. There you go.
First Eagle in LPL.
But yeah, I think so. That's why I have TS instead of LNG. I don't know. For me, like LNG IG is still very close. Um, in my head because again, like the last time the 2 teams fought, it was basically IG got to play in Italy, and I don't see Shun doing that as well in with other matches. And also, like I didn't really like the LNG drafts either, or the WE ones.
I didn't like the draft, and I feel like in the second and third week they kind of they forgot how to play side, because I think the first week, because the team was kind of new, and Icon and Mikuya weren't there initially, so it was Light who was playing the side lanes, on Tristana. Basically, it was similar to what Reckless was doing, in 2017. So he was playing the sideways properly now to set up for Dragon, and they kind of forgot how to do it. But it still works because even though they couldn't get a lead based on like the positioning of the wave in top lane, they still like set up kind of well, and that helps you win fights in LFL. Because everyone's gonna take the dragon fight, like it's too hard to say no.
And it is too hard to say no in LPL. I've noticed that. It's also too hard to zone champions, zone enemy jungler out of Baron Pit, but
I mean,
that's
it's too hard to
another
flank.
day.
It's too hard to flank as well for many people. It's like I'm just gonna engage, even though I'm in front of you. I'm just gonna flash engage,
There you
even though
go.
everyone knows it's coming. I'm just gonna do it, and my team loses afterwards.
See, I rather have players like this than players that are, what happens if I engage and it goes bad, you know? So, I feel like...
Yeah, that's why I feel like it's like so easy to judge like spring split. Like you look at the teams who are top field, it's like, oh, these guys know how to flank, so they are top 4
Yeah.
or top 5.
Sure. I think for me, it's like, I have WE number 1 right now, just because I think they are gelling better than most of the other teams, and they play, like, in my opinion, most correctly around jungle. But I do think for them, like, the biggest problems that they have are still like mid and also AD or bot in terms of just consistency. And when you're setting up, and also like the factor that I talked about before with EDG, which is just making a trade instead of taking the fight. So I think those are kind of the main things that I think I'm going to look out for WE to see if they stay, in my mind, the best team. Obviously, I'm slightly RNG biased, but so I can't put them number 1 because I don't think that they will win against like some of these teams that just win by outhanding people, you know. So we'll see.
I mean, in their hands as well. I mean, I feel like W they wouldn't be first because it's like hands difference.
I think
feel
for
like,
Shanks and Jomong, yeah, that's fair. But
yeah, I feel like for mid lane, I think the difference is too huge. But his team is playing better, so he wins. But for mid
yeah,
lane, I think he's been playing okay, but he's not one of the best mids in LFL.
yeah, he's not one of the best mids yet, but I think he does seem to get better like game to game at least. So maybe he won't be the best mid, but I think that like he has a really good instinct for how to impact fights, and that's the most important thing that I look for in rookies. So we'll see how he learns the other stuff like laning and everything else.
Yeah.
Okay. So any last thoughts? We're doing pretty well on time. We just crossed the hour mark, so.
What do you think of like Suning right now?
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about Suning at all. I had them pretty low.
We didn't talk about Suning and like
Mm-hmm.
Fun Plus. Oh, we talked a little bit about Fun Plus, but yeah.
Yeah, we didn't touch on those teams too much just because like you and I think both had Suning kind of low. Oh, you had Suning actually way higher than I did.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. You had Suning at 5 and I had them at 9.
Oh, what? 9.
I had them at 9, yeah. I thought that losing Sword Heart would be too huge for them because I've seen how SFM plays when he's kind of like left to his own devices and becomes
yeah.
becomes the
I've seen as well. But...
becomes the primary leader of the team, and that's basically what's happening again. Whereas I felt like Sword Art was probably the one who was like reining him in and giving them more direction. So that's why I thought that they would look really bad in spring. I don't know if that will iron out or not. I think is it on or N? I don't, O-N. How does he pronounce it? On. Okay.
I'm not sure. Just on, like turning it on.
Yeah. That's how I've been saying it, but I don't know. Maybe he prefers like O-N or something like that. But I think so for me he has had less like self assurance, I think, than for example, oh my gosh, the TS support. Why am I blanking his name suddenly? Joa, yeah.
Yeah.
He's had less self assurance than Joa, and I think he's like taking less of the good engages that he needs to take. They give up way too much in laning as well, like in terms of advantages. So he has, in my opinion, been the less impressive rookie sport debut of the two. But he also has like way bigger shoes to fill, right? Whereas Yu Yanja, it's like, okay, if you're not entering the lane, you're probably doing an upgrade, but with with on like you basically sort of controlled the entire team in comms allegedly, and I think SFM is difficult, probably difficult to kind of get him to play for lane or to play towards like any kind of plan that isn't his own. So
I mean, I think it's slightly different because, like,
mhm,
for SFM, he's the shot caller for the, at least like during laning or
mhm,
like the early part of the game,
yep,
and but he has a bad habit. I wouldn't say it's a bad habit, but what he, like, his idea of the game is like, if I don't have a lead, I'm just gonna trade and farm.
mhm,
So I mean,
yep,
at least he gets that right. But if you're behind as a team as a whole, then he'll be trying to trade objectives forever, or trade farm forever. But it's not,
mhm.
the game doesn't work that way because there's not so much. There are
Yeah,
not so many things to trade.
I also
And for Sword Art, it's like he knows what, like, he knows there are like some plays or basically like some risks you have to take in order to like come
mhm,
back from a game, and that's something which Sofum don't, like, he doesn't like to think about, but Sword Art does, and I think that is what like makes them so good together, because basically they complement each other well, and like of course they respect each each other as well. That's why like SOF listens to Sword Art when they were playing together.
that makes sense. I think for me, it's like SFM has a very big tendency to get a massive lead by doing things like prioing scuttles, trading farm for objectives, things like this. But then and never ends up being in a position where he feels comfortable to use it. If unless he has someone kind of also telling him when is a good fight or not, just based on how I've seen him play. So that's why I was pretty low on Sunny after the support after they lost Aura. Hopefully someone else can kind of step up and take those reins, but I know that they have a lot of young players on their team, so it might be kind of have to shake out until not shake out until summer.
I think it probably is going to be pretty hard for them to be
Mm-hmm.
like as good as they were, because they were the best FL team
Mm-hmm.
for a while, for like 2 months,
Yep.
and because right now I think like the most experienced player is SOFM, and I don't think that's a good way to set your team. So,
Yeah.
but still, like, he has better carries compared
Mm-hmm.
to the past.
Yep.
Like Bin, Fang, and Angel. Like there's gonna be a few games for sure where basically I have better hands, so they're gonna win.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And like there are still like some junglers who are, I think, really bad or playing performing really badly, like this split. So he can still abuse them, and I'm pretty sure like when he's like 2 or 3 levels ahead, he's like ready to take any fight as well. So
Makes sense. All right, so we also talked a little bit about FPX. Is there any reason that you think that they would fall from top four? Because you brought them up.
FPX.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, as in, I don't think they would fall from top four,
Yep.
but I don't think they would win as well, because like same thing. I think like in the past, like how they won LPL at least for like 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. Like how they won LPL was like they were the only team, like, you know 3-man diving bot or 4-man diving bot, and after they won Worlds, everyone is the same thing. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
started copying them,
Mm-hmm.
and no one makes like basically no one made similar mistakes too often. Like
Yep.
like most teams are not going to get stacked on, and their jungler is not there to defend them.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it rarely happens, but I mean it happened just now, but it rarely happened
Yeah, that
for
wasn't.
for a year, and they probably forgot, because players forget everything in like one year. So,
Yep. I think the.
and I think after that, it's like their players are just not good enough, because I feel like they have some issue, like laning issues.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say laning, but champion pool issues. Basically,
Yep.
like you pick Zoe, and there's nothing they can do against Zoe. If a team knows how to play Zoe, I think FPX is in for like kind of a bad time.
I think the other thing to look out for them is that I think I've actually been impressed by how Bo has played fight so far, but I think that in terms of jungle decision making, it's not as good as IG with Shun. So I'm
Mhm.
interested in seeing like that dynamic, because I think Bo, except for like the Talia game, obviously today was really terrible. And at times his Talia looks really bad, but I think in general, like how he's played fights has been interesting to me. So I'm excited to see like how those players kind of impacted the dynamic because he doesn't really like he doesn't adjust his pathing to help his laners get resets. So more of that responsibility is falling on Crisp. But after, for example, in the Renekton Italy game where Doinb was able to just like face tank the poke and they walked
And
into
die. Oh,
well, he just face tanked the poke and sustained on it right afterwards. Like after he got big enough on Renekton to do that, that then they could walk into jungle and play for jungle camps, which isn't really an FPX thing normally, and that's just something
yeah.
that they're doing more now with Bo. So maybe we'll see more dimensions to them.
Because at least for FPX, from what or like how they are kind of known is like they're not that strong in lane except for top lane, you know. Because back then when they had Khan and like Nuguri, now they are both really strong in lane. That like doesn't matter what people think of Khan when he was an LPL, he was still like a really good laner. Like for Joinby, it depends what champion he has, and but like even though I want memes on Joinby like oh no hands or stuff like that, you know, but he has really good mechanics. But I think the issue with him is he doesn't put too much thought into laning, which is okay as long as you can team fight, you know, and don't be team fights like really well. But I think against like a lot better teams, they'll get punished in lane. Like just like today, he got punished by a Zoe. Kind of hard, but you know, East weren't good enough to win the game.
But yeah, I think in general, I definitely agree with you on Doinb not putting any thought into lane whatsoever. And I think he just has specific champions that he either refuses to play or won't learn. So
I can tell it
yeah,
later on, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. So,
Off the camera, off camera.
but like I definitely you get the sense that he is good. He understands what he wants to do and doesn't necessarily want to deviate from that. Like it isn't that you aren't pay that you can't lane if you're standing there and you're typing timers while people are throwing skill shots at you in the middle of the wave. Like you
Yeah.
just don't care about it, you know. So it's definitely interesting to see how his team plays
His
out.
hand is probably like not on the mouse; it's on enter key. So it's
Exactly.
kind of hard to lane without a mouse. So I
Exactly.
think he does pretty well without mouse.
um But yeah, okay. So that's it for this episode. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I think probably for next time we'll have a different topic that's like more unique. That way we don't seem like just another talk show. But I think that we can provide some interesting perspectives that, especially since we have Nelson, who's like worked with a lot of these players or teams before. So check it out. We'll try to do every week, and we'll let you know when we have a consistent time. If you have any
Yeah, we can just do
questions,
like
yeah,
TSM talk show. I'm pretty sure you
TSM
get
talk show.
like tons of views. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll do a TSM Sword Art talk show where we just talk about Sword Art
Yeah.
every week.
Like why Sora is gonna win LCS for TSM?
Exactly. Okay. So let's see. Okay. So if you have any questions, please just leave them in YouTube comments or DM one of us, at one of us, and we'll think about adding them to the show for next week. Thanks, guys.
Hey, thank you.